With just $4,000 in crushing medical school debt and 18 months left in her pre-med program, Zara Williams counted every dollar earned from her night custodian shifts at Seoul International Hospital until a dying Korean mafia boss arrived and changed everything she thought she knew about medicine and survival. At 23, Zara balanced the weight of industrial cleaning equipment with the relentless demands of advanced pathophysiology courses at Seoul National University. She was methodical, observant, and possessed an intuitive understanding of the human body that her professors consistently praised. Her natural hair was styled in protective braids that she tucked under her work cap, and her dark eyes missed nothing as she moved through the hospital corridors. She was driven by an unwavering vision, a medical degree, a residency in emergency medicine, and a practice that served communities overlooked by traditional healthcare. The night shifts paid triple overtime, and every extra one brought her closer to financial survival. The emergency call came at 2:47 in the morning, piercing the usual quiet of the hospital's 10th floor. Zara was restocking supply closets when the elevator doors burst open, revealing a scene that froze her in place. 6 men in expensive black suits carried an unconscious figure on a stretcher, their faces grim and their movements coordinated with military precision. The man they carried was clearly Korean, probably late 30s, with sharp, aristocratic features and skin that had turned an alarming shade of gray. Blood seeped through his white dress shirt in patterns that suggested internal hemorrhaging, and his breathing was shallow, irregular, struggling. Dr. Park, the head of emergency medicine, met them at the elevator with a team of residents and nurses. 25 of Seoul's finest doctors would work on this case over the next 6 hours. Zara watched from the cleaning alcove as they rushed the unconscious man toward the trauma bay, noting the unusual respect and fear in Dr. Park's voice as he barked orders. This was not an ordinary patient. The men in suits took positions outside the trauma room, their presence transforming the hospital corridor into something that felt dangerous, electric, controlled. Kim Tae-jun. She heard the name whispered between nurses, spoken with a mixture of awe and terror that made her hands pause on her cleaning cart. Even as a foreign exchange student, Zara had heard stories about the Kim family, their control over Seoul's medical supply chains, their reputation for swift and permanent solutions to problems. This was the man bleeding out 30 feet away from her, surrounded by doctors who seemed more afraid than confident. As the hours passed, Zara found herself drawn back to the trauma bay. She cleaned the same section of hallway 4 times, emptied trash bins that were already spotless, organized supply closets that needed no attention. Through the glass windows, she could see the medical team's growing frustration. Monitors beeped frantically, machines hummed with increasing urgency, and still Kim Tae-jun's condition deteriorated. Blood transfusions were failing. Clotting medications had no effect. The most advanced medical equipment in South Korea seemed powerless against whatever was destroying this man's circulatory system. Dr. Park emerged from the trauma room at 6:15, his surgical scrubs soaked with sweat and blood, his face etched with defeat. "We've tried everything," he told the suited men. "His condition is beyond our current capabilities. The clotting disorder is unlike anything in our medical literature. We've consulted specialists in Tokyo, contacted hematologists in Singapore. Nothing is working." Kim Tae-jun's associates exchanged glances that promised consequences for failure, but Dr. Park could only shake his head. "We're running out of options." Zara's grip tightened on her cleaning cart. She knew that pattern of symptoms, not from her textbooks or her hospital rotations, but from something deeper, older, more intuitive. Her grandmother had taught her about blood disorders that ran in certain Korean bloodlines, genetic conditions that mainstream medicine overlooked because they were rare, regional, tied to traditional healing practices that modern doctors dismissed. The irregular bleeding, the failure of standard clotting agents, the gray pallor that suggested a specific enzyme deficiency. She had seen it described in her grandmother's collection of traditional medical texts, remedies that predated modern hospitals by centuries. Through the trauma room window, Kim Tae-jun's eyes opened briefly, unfocused and glazed with pain. For a moment, his gaze found hers across the bustling medical equipment, dark eyes that seemed to see through the chaos around him. Even dying, there was an intensity to his stare that made her breath catch. Power, intelligence, and something that recognized her as more than just another hospital worker in scrubs. Then his eyes closed again, and the monitors resumed their frantic symphony of distress. Zara stared at the man who controlled half of Seoul's underground medical networks, watching 25 of the country's most qualified doctors fail to save his life, and knew exactly what was killing him. At 7:30 in the morning, Dr. Park called the medical team together outside Kim Tae-jun's trauma room and spoke the words that sealed a death sentence. "We've exhausted every protocol," he announced, his voice heavy with defeat. "The patient's condition is deteriorating despite all interventions. Platelet count is dropping, coagulation factors are non-responsive, and his blood pressure continues to fall. We need to discuss palliative care and prepare the family for the inevitable outcome." The 25 doctors who had fought through the night to save Seoul's most dangerous man finally admitted defeat. Zara felt her heart hammer against her ribs as she listened from behind her cleaning cart. She was going to watch a man die when she knew how to save him. The knowledge burned in her chest, a certainty born from years of studying her grandmother's traditional medicine texts, passed down through generations of healers who understood blood disorders that modern medicine couldn't categorize. Kim Tae-jun had hereditary factor V Sol deficiency, a rare genetic condition found almost exclusively in certain Korean bloodlines. The doctors were treating him for standard coagulopathy, but his blood required a specific pressure release technique that only traditional Korean medicine recognized. She should stay quiet. She was a custodian, a foreign student with no medical authority in this hospital. Speaking up would risk her job, her visa status, her entire future in Seoul. But letting this man die when she possessed the knowledge to save him felt like a betrayal of everything her grandmother had taught her about the responsibility that came with healing knowledge. Zara stared through the trauma room window at Kim Tae-jun's gray face and made a choice that would alter the trajectory of both their lives. "Dr. Park," she called out, her voice cutting through the consultation. The senior physician turned, surprise and irritation flickering across his tired features. "You're treating the wrong condition," Zara continued, stepping forward despite the shocked stares from the medical team. "This isn't standard coagulopathy. It's factor V Sol deficiency, and he needs a traditional pressure release technique, not modern clotting agents." The silence that followed felt dangerous. Dr. Park's eyes narrowed as he took in Zara's custodial uniform, her youth, her audacity in challenging 24 medical experts. "Who do you think you are?" he demanded. "This patient is beyond our capabilities, and you're suggesting folk medicine?" But Dr. Kim Ji-soo, the youngest member of the hematology team, stepped closer to Zara with sudden interest. "Factor V Sol deficiency," Dr. Kim repeated slowly. "I've read about it in historical medical texts, but I've never seen a case. How do you know about this condition?" "My grandmother was a traditional healer in Busan before she immigrated to America," Zara explained, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "She treated this exact blood disorder using a technique that releases pressure from specific meridian points along the arm. The procedure requires a precise incision at the medial antecubital vein, not the standard venipuncture sites you've been using. If I'm right, the bleeding will stop within minutes, and his clotting factors will stabilize." Dr. Park looked between Zara and his dying patient, calculation replacing irritation in his expression. "If you're wrong," he said quietly, "Kim Tae-jun dies anyway, and you'll be held responsible for interfering with medical treatment. If you're right," Dr. Kim added, "you'll have succeeded where 25 doctors failed." The weight of that possibility hung in the air between them. Zara moved toward the trauma room with confident steps that belied her thundering heart. Kim Tae-jun lay unconscious, his breathing shallow and labored, surrounded by machines that monitored his steady decline toward death. She positioned herself at his left side and gently extended his arm, feeling for the specific pressure points her grandmother had taught her to identify. His skin was cold, clammy, but underneath she could feel the irregular pulse that confirmed her diagnosis. The traditional texts described this technique as requiring intuition as much as knowledge. Zara closed her eyes briefly, feeling for the exact location where the blocked meridian intersected with the compromised vein. When she opened them again, her hands moved with steady precision. Using a sterile scalpel, she made a small, diagonal incision at an angle that modern medicine would consider unconventional, following the path her grandmother had shown her on anatomical drawings decades old. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. The medical team watched in tense silence as Kim Tae-jun's monitors continued their ominous symphony. Then, slowly, the bleeding began to change. Instead of the uncontrolled hemorrhaging that had plagued him for hours, the blood flow became regular, controlled, purposeful. The monitors registered stabilizing blood pressure, normalizing heart rate, improved oxygenation. Dr. Park checked the readings twice, his expression shifting from skepticism to amazement. "It's working," Dr. Kim whispered, staring at the monitors in disbelief. "His coagulation factors are responding. Blood pressure is climbing. How is this possible?" But Zara's attention was focused entirely on Kim Tae-jun's face as his eyes slowly opened, consciousness returning as his blood chemistry balanced. Those dark, intelligent eyes found hers immediately, and she saw the exact moment he realized he was alive when he should have been dead. "Who?" Kim Tae-jun asked, his voice hoarse but clear. "Did this?" Dr. Park gestured toward Zara with something approaching reverence. "This young woman diagnosed and treated a condition that none of us recognized," he explained. "She saved your life using traditional Korean medical techniques that predate modern medicine." Kim Tae-jun's gaze never left Zara's face as he absorbed this information, his expression unreadable but intense. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Zara Williams," she replied, suddenly aware that every person in the trauma room was watching this exchange with fascination. Kim Tae-jun repeated her name slowly, as if committing it to memory, then spoke words that would echo through the rest of her life. "Zara Williams," he said, his voice carrying quiet authority despite his weakened state. "You've just become the most valuable person in Seoul." Kim Tae-jun was discharged from Seoul International Hospital after 72 hours of observation, his recovery so complete that the medical team documented it as unprecedented in their files. But before he left, Zara learned exactly who she had saved and why that knowledge would reshape every aspect of her existence. Kim Tae-jun controlled the Kim family operations throughout Seoul, a network that included legitimate pharmaceutical imports, medical supply distribution, and private healthcare facilities that served clients who could not risk exposure in public hospitals. His empire had been built from necessity after his parents died in what appeared to be medical malpractice, but was actually deliberate poisoning orchestrated by a rival syndicate. Every doctor, every medical professional, every healing relationship in Kim Tae-jun's world required absolute trust because betrayal meant death. 3 days after saving his life, Zara discovered that her existence had been thoroughly investigated. Kim's people knew about her academic record at Seoul National University, her pre-med excellence despite financial constraints, her grandmother's background as a traditional healer in Busan, her family's medical knowledge spanning 3 generations, her student visa status, her work history, and her crushing educational debt. They knew she sent money to her mother in Detroit, knew she worked 18-hour days between classes and custodial shifts, knew she had been accepted to medical school, pending her ability to fund the remaining semesters. Kim Tae-jun had researched her life with the same methodical precision he applied to eliminating business threats. The test came on a Thursday evening during her usual shift. Zara was restocking medical supplies when she heard shouting from the emergency department loading dock. She rushed outside to find one of Kim's associates, a man named Lee Mi-ho, bleeding heavily from what appeared to be a knife wound to his abdomen. He was conscious but pale, his expensive suit soaked with blood, and his eyes held the same dangerous intensity she recognized from Kim's inner circle. "No hospitals," Lee Mi-ho gasped as she approached. "Too many questions. Too much exposure. Can you help me, or should I call someone else?" Zara looked at the wounded man, understanding immediately that this was an evaluation. She could report the incident, follow hospital protocols, involve the authorities, and maintain her distance from Kim's world. Or she could provide medical assistance to someone whose injury clearly resulted from criminal activity, compromising her ethical position but potentially saving a life. The choice felt enormous, weighted with implications that extended far beyond this moment. She knelt beside Lee Mi-ho, assessed the wound with professional efficiency, and began applying pressure while guiding him toward a supply room where she could work without observation. The knife had missed vital organs, but the bleeding required careful suturing and the wound needed proper cleaning to prevent infection. Zara worked in focused silence, using supplies from the hospital to treat a patient who could never appear on official records. Lee Miho watched her hands with calculating eyes, noting her competence, her discretion, her willingness to help without asking questions about how he had been stabbed or why he could not seek traditional medical care. When she finished, he tested the sutures, nodded approvingly, and made a phone call in rapid Korean that she understood meant she had passed whatever evaluation this represented. 2 days later, Zara was summoned to Kim Tae-jun's private suite at the Lotte Hotel, the most exclusive accommodation in Seoul. The presidential suite occupied the entire top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, custom Italian furniture, original artwork, and a sense of wealth and power that permeated every surface. Security was discreet but omnipresent, men in expensive suits positioned at every entrance, their presence transforming the luxurious space into something that felt like a fortress disguised as a palace. Kim Tae-jun waited for her in a private study lined with medical texts, both modern and traditional, suggesting he had educated himself about her area of expertise. He looked entirely different from the dying man she had saved. His sharp features were animated with health and intelligence, his dark hair perfectly styled, his expensive charcoal suit tailored to perfection. But it was his eyes that commanded attention, dark and penetrating, missing nothing as they assessed her reaction to his environment. This was Kim Tae-jun in his element, powerful and controlled, surrounded by evidence of his resources and influence. The contrast with the vulnerable patient she had treated was both striking and deliberately orchestrated. "Sit," Kim Tae-jun said, gesturing toward a leather chair positioned across from his desk. His English was perfect, cultured, revealing an education that matched his sophistication. "I have a proposition for you, Miss Williams," he continued, placing a leather portfolio on the desk between them. "Your intervention saved my life using knowledge that 25 qualified doctors did not possess. This makes you extraordinarily valuable in my particular line of work. I would like to retain your services on an exclusive basis." The terms were specific and comprehensive. $150,000 per year, paid monthly in cash. Complete funding for her remaining medical school education, including tuition, books, and living expenses. A furnished apartment in Seoul's most secure residential district. Full protection for her family in Detroit, including her mother's medical insurance and financial support. In exchange, Zara would serve as Kim's private medical consultant, treating his associates when traditional hospitals posed too great a security risk, maintaining absolute discretion about all patients and procedures, and providing her expertise exclusively to the Kim family organization. Zara listened to the terms with growing amazement and horror. The money would eliminate every financial pressure in her life, provide educational opportunities beyond her wildest aspirations, and secure her family's future. But accepting would mean treating criminals, potentially violent people whose injuries resulted from illegal activities. It would compromise her medical ethics, bind her to a world of violence and secrecy, and make her complicit in activities that existed outside the law. She looked across the desk at Kim Tae-jun, this dangerous and compelling man who offered salvation wrapped in moral complexity. "What you're asking me to do," Zara said carefully, "contradicts everything I've been taught about medical ethics. I'm supposed to report criminal injuries, cooperate with authorities, maintain patient records that can be reviewed by oversight boards. You're asking me to treat people in secret, to ignore how they were injured, to become part of an organization that operates outside legal boundaries." Kim Tae-jun leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful but unmoved by her objections. "Let me clarify your current situation, Miss Williams," he replied, his voice gentle but implacable. "You have 18 months remaining in your pre-med program and insufficient funds to complete your education. You work night shifts as a custodian while maintaining academic excellence, sleeping 4 hours per night, surviving on instant noodles and determination. Your mother works 2 jobs in Detroit to support herself while sending you what money she can spare. You are brilliant, capable, and trapped by circumstances beyond your control." He opened the portfolio and removed financial documents that detailed her exact situation with uncomfortable accuracy. "Your current debt totals $63,000. Your projected debt upon completion of medical school will exceed $200,000. At your current income level, you will spend the first 15 years of your medical career servicing that debt rather than practicing medicine. Meanwhile, your mother's health insurance was canceled last month due to non-payment, and she is avoiding medical care she desperately needs because she cannot afford it. The documents spread across his desk represented a comprehensive analysis of her financial prison, every detail confirming the impossible mathematics of her situation. Kim Tae-jun continued with relentless logic. I am not asking you to abandon medical ethics, Miss Williams. I am offering you the opportunity to practice medicine without financial constraints, to save lives regardless of whether those lives meet society's approval, to use your extraordinary abilities without bureaucratic interference. The people I am asking you to treat are human beings who deserve medical care, even if their professions involve moral ambiguity. Zara stared at the financial projections, seeing her future mapped in crushing detail. Refusing Kim's offer meant accepting years of struggle, watching her mother deteriorate without medical care, possibly abandoning her medical dreams due to financial impossibility. Accepting meant financial freedom, educational support, family security, and the opportunity to practice medicine immediately. It also meant moral compromise, professional risk, and binding herself to a man whose world operated by rules she did not understand. You need an answer, Kim Tae-jun said, his voice patient but final. Tonight. Not tomorrow, not next week. Tonight. Because time is a luxury that neither of us can afford, and opportunities like this do not repeat themselves. Choose carefully, Miss Williams. Choose with full knowledge of what refusing will cost you and what accepting will provide. Zara looked into those dark, intelligent eyes and recognized the truth of her situation. Kim Tae-jun was not giving her a choice between good and evil. He was giving her a choice between impossible circumstances and extraordinary opportunity, between moral purity and practical survival, between struggling alone and accepting powerful protection. She thought of her mother postponing medical treatment, of her own dreams deferred by financial reality, of her grandmother's teachings about the responsibility that came with healing knowledge. She reached across the desk and picked up the pen he had placed beside the contract. I accept, Mr. Kim, she said, her voice steady despite the enormity of her decision. Kim Tae-jun smiled for the first time since she had met him, an expression that transformed his sharp features and revealed genuine satisfaction. Welcome to your new life, Miss Williams, he replied. We begin tomorrow. Over the next 3 months, Zara Williams transformed from struggling pre-med student into the most trusted medical professional in Seoul's criminal underground. Her secure apartment in the Gangnam district became an unofficial clinic where Kim Tae-jun's associates arrived with injuries that could never appear in hospital records. Gunshot wounds that needed discreet treatment, knife cuts from territorial disputes, broken bones from interrogations gone wrong, poisoning attempts that required immediate antidotes unavailable through traditional medical channels. Zara treated them all with professional efficiency, never asking questions about causes, focusing entirely on healing regardless of how the damage had occurred. Kim Tae-jun observed every procedure from a distance, noting her steady hands during emergency surgery, her calm voice when treating patients in extreme pain, her ability to maintain medical standards even in improvised conditions. She never flinched when blood soaked through expensive suits, never showed fear when dangerous men trusted her with their lives, never betrayed the slightest indication that she might compromise patient confidentiality. Her grandmother's traditional healing knowledge combined with modern medical training created capabilities that no other doctor in his organization possessed. Kim Tae-jun realized he had acquired more than a medical consultant. He had found someone whose value extended far beyond their original arrangement. Late evening medical consultations gradually evolved into extended conversations about healing philosophies, Korean traditional medicine, and the intersection of ancient wisdom with contemporary practice. Zara discovered that Kim Tae-jun possessed extensive knowledge of herbal remedies, pressure point therapy, and diagnostic techniques that predated modern hospitals by centuries. His education in traditional medicine was comprehensive, driven by necessity after his family's trauma, and his questions revealed genuine intellectual curiosity rather than casual interest. These discussions occurred in his private study while she updated medical records, their voices quiet in the lamplight, surrounded by books that bridged cultures and healing traditions. During one of these evening conversations, Kim Tae-jun revealed the specific circumstances that had shaped his approach to medical care and personal security. His parents had been murdered by a doctor working for a rival syndicate, a man who had administered a slow-acting poison disguised as cardiac medication over a period of months. The deliberate medical murder had been undetectable until autopsy revealed the systematic poisoning, by which time the killer had disappeared and the rival organization had absorbed Kim family territory. Kim Tae-jun had inherited control of the family operations at 25, but the trauma of watching his parents deteriorate under supposedly expert medical care had created permanent paranoia about trusting healthcare providers. "This is why your intervention at the hospital was so significant," Kim Tae-jun explained, his dark eyes reflecting memories that still carried pain 15 years later. "You saved my life using knowledge that mainstream medicine ignores, proving that traditional healing wisdom can succeed where modern approaches fail. But more importantly, you acted to save a stranger without considering personal benefit or risk. That combination of capability and integrity is extraordinarily rare in my experience." Zara shared her own family's medical trauma, describing her grandmother's death from complications that could have been prevented if adequate health care had been accessible to elderly immigrants without insurance. Her grandmother had possessed remarkable healing knowledge but had been dismissed by emergency room doctors who saw only an old Korean woman speaking broken English. The traditional medicine techniques that might have saved her life were ignored in favor of standard protocols that proved inadequate for her specific condition. Zara had entered medicine determined to bridge that gap between traditional wisdom and contemporary practice, to ensure that healing knowledge was respected regardless of its cultural origins. These personal revelations created understanding that transcended their professional arrangement. Both had witnessed the failure of medical systems they should have been able to trust. Both valued healing knowledge that existed outside institutional recognition. Both understood the devastating consequences when medical care became corrupted by politics or prejudice. Their conversations deepened into genuine intellectual partnership, mutual respect, and the beginning of emotional intimacy that neither had anticipated when their contract was signed. The first warning signs appeared in late October when Zara noticed unfamiliar faces in the hospital parking garage, men who seemed to be observing her movements rather than visiting patients. Her apartment building's security guard mentioned strangers asking questions about her schedule, her visitors, her daily routines. Phone calls to her mother in Detroit revealed someone had been inquiring about her family background, her financial situation, her connections, and soul. The surveillance was professional, systematic, and clearly intended to gather intelligence for purposes that extended beyond casual interest. Kim Tae-jun confirmed her suspicions during their next evening meeting. "The Yakuza syndicate that controls pharmaceutical distribution in southern Seoul has learned about your existence," he informed her, his voice carrying controlled anger that suggested immediate danger. "They understand that I have access to medical expertise that makes me less vulnerable, less dependent on healthcare systems they can compromise. Your skills represent a strategic advantage they cannot tolerate, which makes you a target for elimination or acquisition." The escalation came without additional warning. Zara finished her custodial shift at Seoul International Hospital just after midnight, walking toward her car in the underground parking garage that she had traversed safely hundreds of times. 3 men emerged from between parked vehicles, their movements coordinated and purposeful, blocking her access to her car and the elevator. They were not Kim's people. Their expensive suits could not disguise the predatory intelligence in their eyes, the casual confidence of men accustomed to taking what they wanted through violence or intimidation. "Miss Williams," the tallest man said in accented English, his voice polite but utterly menacing. "You will come with us quietly, or we will ensure your cooperation through methods that will leave permanent reminders of your poor judgment. We have questions about your employer's medical arrangements, and you will provide complete answers regardless of any confidentiality agreements you may have signed." Zara's blood turned to ice as she realized the complete futility of her situation. These men were professional kidnappers executing a carefully planned operation in an isolated location where screaming would accomplish nothing. Her cell phone was in her purse, but reaching for it would likely trigger immediate violence. She could attempt to run, but they clearly controlled all exit routes. She could try to negotiate, but their expressions suggested that conversation was not their primary objective. She was utterly powerless, trapped by circumstances beyond her control, facing men who viewed her as a resource to be acquired rather than a person deserving basic human rights. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the parking garage, multiple sets moving with military precision and unmistakable authority. Kim Tae-jun appeared with 5 of his security specialists, their presence transforming the enclosed space into something that felt dangerous for entirely different reasons. The kidnapping attempt had lasted less than 3 minutes, but Kim's response suggested comprehensive surveillance and immediate mobilization capabilities that the Yakuza operatives had clearly underestimated. "Gentlemen," Kim Tae-jun said, his voice carrying quiet authority that seemed more threatening than shouting would have been. "You are interfering with someone under my personal protection. This represents a significant miscalculation on your organization's part. I suggest you reconsider your current course of action before it becomes irreversible." The confrontation that followed was brief, efficient, and utterly one-sided. Kim's security team moved with practiced coordination, their actions designed to neutralize threats permanently rather than simply deter future attempts. The Yakuza operatives disappeared from the parking garage as thoroughly as if they had never existed, leaving no evidence of their presence or their intentions. Kim Tae-jun's organization had eliminated an immediate threat while simultaneously sending a message that would prevent similar attempts by rival syndicates. Zara stood in the suddenly quiet parking garage, her hands trembling as the adrenaline of absolute terror gradually receded. Kim Tae-jun approached her with gentle movements that contrasted dramatically with the cold efficiency he had displayed during the threat elimination. "Are you injured?" he asked, his dark eyes scanning her face for signs of trauma or physical harm. His voice carried genuine concern that seemed incongruous with the violence he had just orchestrated. "I'm not hurt," Zara replied, her voice steadier than she had expected given the circumstances. "But I understand now why you said my safety required serious protection. I thought I could maintain some distance from your world while providing medical services, but tonight proved that assumption was naive. Your enemies see me as leverage against you, which means my independent existence is no longer possible." Kim Tae-jun nodded grimly, understanding the implications of her realization. "From tonight forward, you will live within my compound in Hanamdong," he informed her. "Personal security will accompany you to classes, to the hospital, to any location outside our controlled territory. Your previous life, your attempts to maintain separation between our professional arrangement and your personal safety, ended the moment rival organizations identified you as strategically significant." As they drove through Seoul's empty streets toward the most exclusive residential district in the city, Zara processed the complete transformation of her circumstances. She had entered Kim Tae-jun's world voluntarily, motivated by financial necessity and educational opportunity. But tonight's events had eliminated the illusion that she could remain partially independent while accepting his protection. The Yakuza attempt had proven that her association with Kim made her a target for elimination, which meant her survival now depended entirely on his organization's ability to maintain security through methods she was only beginning to understand. The Kim family compound in Hanamdong occupied an entire city block behind high walls that concealed a sprawling estate designed for both luxury and security. Multiple buildings housed family members, security personnel, administrative offices, and guest accommodations that could serve as safe houses during territorial conflicts. Zara's new residence was a private villa within the compound, furnished with custom furniture, equipped with medical supplies, and protected by security measures that made the location virtually impregnable. "You saved my life using traditional healing knowledge," Kim Tae-jun said as they stood in the villa's main room, looking out at gardens illuminated by security lighting. "Tonight, I saved yours using methods that traditional society would condemn. We are now bound together by mutual dependence that extends far beyond our original contract. Your safety depends on my power, and my health depends on your knowledge. Neither of us can survive without the other." The emergency call came at 3:17 in the morning, shattering the peaceful quiet of Zara's villa within the Kim compound. Kim Tae-jun had been ambushed during a territory negotiation in Itaewon, caught in crossfire between his security team and a rival faction that had violated every protocol of civilized criminal discourse. The details were horrifying in their simplicity. Kim had taken 3 bullets to his torso, was losing blood at a catastrophic rate, and absolutely refused transport to any hospital where his condition might be reported to authorities or where rival organizations could finish what they had started. Zara rushed to the compound's main house to find Kim Tae-jun unconscious on a dining room table that had been hastily converted into an operating surface. His expensive black suit had been cut away, revealing wounds that would have challenged a fully equipped trauma center. The largest bullet had entered just below his left rib cage, potentially damaging his spleen or liver, while the other 2 had created deep muscle trauma that was bleeding heavily despite pressure bandages applied by his security team. His skin had turned gray, his breathing was shallow and labored, and his pulse was weak and irregular. Without immediate surgical intervention, Kim Tae-jun would die within the hour. "This is impossible," Zara said, staring at the improvised operating room with growing horror. "He needs a hospital, a surgical team, proper anesthesia, blood transfusion capabilities, sterile conditions. I can't perform major abdominal surgery on a dining room table with medical supplies designed for minor injuries. If I attempt this and fail, he dies. If I don't attempt it, he dies anyway. But at least I won't be responsible for inadequate treatment." Lee Mi-ho, Kim's most trusted lieutenant, grabbed Zara's shoulders with hands that trembled despite his attempts at control. "Boss refuses hospitals," he said urgently in English mixed with desperate Korean. "Says rival factions have people inside every major medical facility in Seoul. Says if he goes to hospital, he dies from poison or convenient medical error. You are only doctor he trusts. You must try, or we lose him anyway." Zara looked at Kim Tae-jun's unconscious face, recognizing the terrible irony of their situation. The man who had saved her from financial ruin and physical danger now lay dying, because the same circumstances that had brought them together made conventional medical care impossible for him. His paranoia about hospital security was entirely rational given his family's history, but it meant that his survival depended entirely on her willingness to attempt surgery far beyond her training and experience using equipment inadequate for the complexity of his injuries. She spent precious minutes sterilizing instruments with boiling water and alcohol, improvising surgical tools from the compound's medical supplies, and preparing makeshift anesthesia for medications designed for much simpler procedures. Every moment of delay increased the likelihood that Kim would bleed to death before she could even begin, but attempting surgery without proper preparation would guarantee failure. Her hands moved with steady efficiency despite the magnitude of what she was attempting, guided by medical training, traditional healing knowledge, and desperate determination to save the man who had become far more important to her than any professional arrangement should allow. The surgery lasted 4 hours and tested every aspect of Zara's medical capabilities. The bullet near his ribcage had damaged his spleen, but had missed major arteries by millimeters, while the muscle trauma required careful suturing to prevent permanent mobility impairment. Working without proper lighting, without surgical assistance, without monitoring equipment, Zara relied on instinct and touch to navigate Kim's internal injuries. Her grandmother's teachings about pressure points and energy flow guided her hands when modern medical knowledge reached its limits, while her pre-med training provided the technical precision necessary for successful surgery. When Kim Tae-jun's breathing finally stabilized and his color began returning to normal, Zara collapsed into a chair beside the makeshift operating table, exhausted and emotionally drained by the intensity of the procedure. She had saved his life, but the experience had forced her to confront the depth of her feelings for this dangerous and compelling man. Watching him hover between life and death had revealed emotions that extended far beyond professional respect or gratitude for financial support. She had been terrified of losing him in ways that had nothing to do with their contractual arrangement. Kim Tae-jun regained consciousness just after dawn, his dark eyes immediately finding Zara's face as awareness returned. For long moments, he simply looked at her, processing the fact that he was alive when he should have been dead, understanding that she had performed surgery under impossible conditions to save him. His voice was hoarse when he finally spoke, but his words carried weight that transcended their immediate circumstances. "You could have let me die," Kim Tae-jun said quietly, his gaze never leaving her face. "It would have released you from our arrangement, eliminated any danger to your safety, allowed you to return to your previous life. No one would have blamed you for refusing to attempt surgery you weren't qualified to perform. But you stayed. You fought for my life when logic suggested abandoning me would be wiser." Zara felt tears she had been suppressing since the emergency call finally spilled down her cheeks. "I couldn't let you die," she replied, her voice breaking with emotion she could no longer contain. "Not because of our contract or financial obligations, but because losing you would have destroyed something in me that I didn't even realize existed until tonight. I was terrified every moment during that surgery, not just of failing medically, but of losing someone who has become essential to my existence." Kim Tae-jun reached out with considerable effort, his hand finding hers and gripping it with surprising strength despite his weakened condition. "You are not just my medical consultant, Zara," he said, his voice carrying admission that seemed to cost him significant emotional effort. "You are not just someone I protect because of professional arrangements or contractual obligations. You have become the center of my world, the person whose safety matters more than territory, more than power, more than the empire I built to honor my family's memory." The confession continued with raw honesty that stripped away every defense Kim Tae-jun had maintained since their first meeting. "I told myself I needed you because of your medical knowledge, because you could save lives that others could not, because traditional healing wisdom made you strategically valuable. But that was self-deception designed to avoid acknowledging deeper truth. I need you because you make me feel human rather than simply powerful. You see past the violence and control to whatever decent impulses remain in me. You make this dark world bearable." Zara leaned closer, studying his face in the morning light filtering through windows that overlooked gardens designed for both beauty and security. She saw exhaustion from his ordeal, but also vulnerability that he had never revealed before, honesty that made him seem younger despite his sharp features and calculating intelligence. This was Kim Tae-jun without armor, without the controlled intensity that made grown men step aside when he entered rooms, without the cold authority that commanded instant obedience from everyone in his organization. "I fell in love with you," she whispered, the admission surprising her with its certainty and clarity. "Not with your power or protection or financial support, but with the man who studies traditional healing texts because he values knowledge regardless of its cultural origins. The man who treats my opinions with respect, even though I'm decades younger and infinitely less experienced. The man who risks his life to defend people under his protection, even when conventional wisdom suggests negotiation would be safer." Kim Tae-jun's grip on her hand tightened as he absorbed her words, his expression shifting from vulnerable confession to something deeper, more possessive, more final. "You're mine, Zara," he said, his voice carrying quiet authority despite his physical weakness. "Not as employee or contract partner or professional associate, but as the woman I choose above everything else in my world. Mine to protect, mine to cherish, mine to love completely and without reservation." The possession declaration hung in the air between them, carrying weight that transcended their immediate circumstances. Zara felt something fundamental shift in her understanding of their relationship, recognition that they had moved beyond arrangement or convenience into territory that was permanent, irrevocable, transformative. "And you're mine," she replied, her voice steady with conviction that surprised them both. "My brilliant, dangerous, impossible man who saves lives by taking others, who built an empire from tragedy, who trusts me with vulnerabilities he shows no one else." Kim Tae-jun used his remaining strength to pull her closer, until she was leaning over him, her face inches from his. "Forever," he breathed against her lips before kissing her with desperate intensity that spoke of mortality confronted and love acknowledged. The kiss tasted of relief and commitment and the recognition that they had chosen each other completely, regardless of consequences or complications or the dangerous world that surrounded them. When they finally separated, Zara rested her forehead against his. both of them breathing heavily from the emotional intensity of admissions that had transformed everything between them. "We're bound together now," Kim Tae-jun murmured, his dark eyes holding hers with absolute certainty. "Not by contracts or circumstances or mutual benefit, but by choice that nothing can dissolve. You saved my life tonight, and I will spend the rest of mine ensuring yours remains safe and cherished." Zara smiled despite her exhaustion, understanding that their journey from desperate professional arrangement to profound emotional connection was complete. She belonged to this complex, dangerous, devoted man, and he belonged to her, bound by experiences that had tested every aspect of their characters and revealed feelings neither had anticipated when she first cut his vein to save his life months earlier. Their future stretched ahead, secured by love that had survived medical crises, criminal threats, and personal revelations that had stripped away every pretense between them. The Yakuza syndicate that had threatened Zara's life ceased to exist within 72 hours of Kim Tae-jun's recovery from surgery. Their elimination was so thorough and systematic that rival organizations throughout Seoul understood immediately that targeting Kim's medical consultant had been a miscalculation of catastrophic proportions. The message was clear and permanent. Anyone who threatened Zara Williams would face consequences that extended far beyond conventional territorial disputes. Kim's position as head of the most powerful criminal organization in Seoul was now unquestionable, secured by demonstration of his willingness to eliminate entire opposing factions to protect what belonged to him. With external threats permanently removed, Kim Tae-jun turned his attention to ensuring Zara's educational and professional future exceeded every aspiration she had held before their lives intersected. Her final 18 months at Seoul National University became a masterclass in academic excellence supported by unlimited resources. Private tutors supplemented her coursework, exclusive laboratory access accelerated her research projects, and internships at the most prestigious medical facilities in Asia provided experience that money typically could not purchase. When Zara graduated summa cum laude with honors that placed her among the top medical students in Seoul's history, Kim's pride was evident to everyone who witnessed the ceremony. 6 months after graduation, Kim Tae-jun arranged a formal dinner at his family compound that brought together 3 generations of Kim family leadership, traditional Korean elders whose approval carried significant cultural weight, and business associates whose respect validated his personal choices. The gathering served multiple purposes, introducing Zara as his chosen partner, demonstrating his commitment to marriage rather than temporary arrangement, and seeking family blessing for a union that bridged cultures while honoring traditions that predated modern Korea by centuries. The proposal itself occurred in Kim's private study, surrounded by medical texts that had brought them together and traditional Korean artifacts that represented his family heritage. Kim Tae-jun knelt before Zara with a ring that had belonged to his grandmother, a woman who had survived Japanese occupation and Korean War to build the foundation of everything the Kim family had become. "Marry me, Zara Williams," Kim said with quiet formality that carried the weight of cultural significance and personal devotion. "Not because our arrangement requires it, not because circumstances demand it, but because you are the woman I choose to build my future with, the person whose dreams matter more to me than empire or territory or power." Zara accepted with tears in her eyes and absolute certainty in her heart, understanding that marriage to Kim Tae-jun meant becoming part of a legacy that extended far beyond their personal relationship. The engagement was celebrated by the Kim family with traditional ceremonies that honored both Korean customs and acknowledgement of Zara's American heritage, creating fusion of cultures that felt natural rather than forced. Wedding planning became collaborative effort involving traditional Korean elements, modern medical symbolism, and personal touches that reflected their unique journey from medical crisis to profound love. Before their marriage, Kim fulfilled a promise he had made during their first contract negotiation. The Williams Medical Center opened in Seoul's Gangnam district as a state-of-the-art facility that served both traditional patients requiring conventional medical care and discrete patients whose injuries necessitated confidential treatment. Zara's name was prominently displayed as medical director, her credentials establishing legitimacy, while her association with Kim's organization ensured security. The clinic represented everything she had dreamed of achieving. Medical practice that honored traditional healing wisdom, patient care without bureaucratic interference, and financial stability that allowed focus on healing rather than profit margins. The wedding ceremony took place at the Kim family compound in late spring, with cherry blossoms creating a backdrop that photographers captured for private albums that would never be seen outside the family circle. Traditional Korean elements included tea ceremony with Kim family elders, exchange of wooden geese representing lifelong fidelity, and hanbok worn by both bride and groom to honor cultural heritage. Modern touches reflected their international relationship. Vows spoken in both English and Korean, medical symbolism incorporated into floral arrangements, and reception that celebrated fusion of Eastern and Western traditions. As Kim Tae-jun placed the wedding ring on Zara's finger, he spoke words that summarized their transformation from desperate strangers to devoted partners. "You saved my life with knowledge that transcended conventional medicine," he said, his voice carrying emotion that made grown men in his organization look away respectfully. "Now I promise to protect your dreams while you heal my world, to ensure your medical practice flourishes while our family grows, to honor your courage while cherishing your love." Zara's response reflected understanding of the complete life transformation she had chosen. "I found you dying from a condition that 25 doctors couldn't treat," she replied, her voice clear and confident despite tears of joy. "Now I choose you living as the man who turned my impossible circumstances into extraordinary opportunities, who protected my family while supporting my dreams, who built me a future I never dared imagine when I was counting dollars in a hospital cleaning closet." 6 months after their wedding, Dr. Zara Kim stood in her private medical clinic, reviewing patient files that represented the successful fusion of legitimate medical practice with discreet healthcare for Kim family associates. Her wedding ring caught the morning light as she prepared for another day that would include routine checkups for ordinary patients, emergency surgery for someone whose injuries could not be reported to authorities, consultations about traditional Korean remedies, and evening conversations with her husband about expanding their medical network throughout Asia. The woman who had once worked night shifts as a hospital custodian while struggling to fund her pre-med education now directed a medical facility that served hundreds of patients monthly, commanded respect from Seoul's medical establishment, and wielded influence that extended far beyond conventional healthcare boundaries. Her transformation was complete not just in professional terms, but in personal understanding of her own worth and capabilities. Kim Tae-jun had not rescued her from poverty. He had provided resources that allowed her natural abilities to flourish without constraint. As Zara prepared for her first surgery of the day, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from desperate financial circumstances to this position of medical authority and personal fulfillment. Every decision had been fraught with moral complexity. Every choice had required courage she wasn't certain she possessed. Every step had led deeper into a world that operated by rules she was still learning. But the result was a life that combined her passion for healing with love for a man who understood the value of knowledge regardless of its cultural origins. Kim Tae-jun appeared in the clinic doorway, his presence transforming the sterile medical environment into something that felt warm and personal. "Ready for another day of saving lives, Dr. Kim?" he asked with the slight smile that appeared only when they were alone together. His expensive suit and controlled intensity remained unchanged, but his eyes held warmth that was reserved exclusively for her, acknowledgement of partnership that had survived medical crises, criminal threats, and cultural challenges to become something unshakable. "Always," Zara replied, reaching out to straighten his tie in a gesture of domestic intimacy that would have seemed impossible during their first tense meeting in a hospital trauma room. Her hands no longer trembled when touching this dangerous and devoted man who had become the center of her world, the foundation of her security, the love of her extraordinary life.